Professor Cole here. Today I'm going to show you how to create your own portfolio to store your prints in. Ideally, I'd like to create a portfolio very similar to this one here. This is store-bought, but I think it's good to learn how to create your own, which is a lot cheaper than what you can buy at the store. This one has optional ties. I do recommend this as a way to keep the portfolio intact. There are versions out there that have elastic on them, but those wear out over the years. So today I'll show you how to actually make one of these on your own, and also how to interleave your prints and how to attach like an inner lining page. One thing for your hardbound portfolios, I'd like you to include one hand-printed element, or you can digitally print an element of it, but the imagery somehow has to involve some kind of hand printmaking, whether it's monotype, silk screened, or another method that we've covered in class or that I can cover if you're interested. So this is the main one I'm going to show you how to do today, but you can customize it in more ways than just printing. You can also incorporate pages if you want to that have maybe little folders at the bottom. This is done by making paper a little bit longer and kind of folding over the bottom. Or you can even consider other ways of enclosing your portfolio. In this one, for example, I actually used a magnet. This one is unfinished, just to kind of show you sometimes the inside of what a portfolio could look like. I'm going to show you what's called a soft spine. So it won't have this element, but if you want to create something more like a full hardbound book and want a protective hard spine, this kind of gives you an idea of what that might look like. But yes, this one has an additional flap to it, so this could be another option that you have. Okay, so I'm going to show you at least one version of making a portfolio that has what's called a soft spine. One of the samples I showed you earlier had extra of this cardboard material in the spine, but the ones I'll show you will be soft, meaning it doesn't have hardboard in the center. Now there's two ways to go about this. The first one I'm going to show you is similar to the one on my left. I will scan these sheets and post them to Blackboard later. Now there's advantages and disadvantages to both of these methods. I think the one on the right side uses a single piece of either paper or book cloth or other material, and everything can be connected to it seamlessly in one smooth cover. But if you are using materials that isn't big enough to cover both boards and the spine, this first one I'm going to show you might be a better bet. It's also This other one over here is also a better one if you don't know how thick your spine is going to be right away. So let's take a look at the materials. Okay, materials you'll need. You'll need 2 book boards. This can be called book board, Davy board. You can also use chipboard or mat board, or even foam core if you want something a little bit lighter, but it's not as dense, and so things could get stabbed through it. And so you want your board to be about, I would say about 1/4 inch larger all the way around than your largest prints. And so this will require measuring your prints to determine how big your board will be. Next, you'll need a material for your book cover. Here I'm using book cloth, but you can actually use paper, you can use your prints. The thicker the material, sometimes the harder it is to work with, but I've also used leather and other things before, so I will cover what you need to consider if you're using something very thick. I have 2 of these, and they're 1 inch larger on all sides than your board. I also have kind of an inner page that I will use, and you'll see how that is used later. So basically what it might look like is something like this, where you have your board, your outer paper that's about 1 inch larger than your board on all sides, and an inner paper. And this inner paper can actually be about the size of your prints. You'll also want to grab possibly a drill if you want to create holes to make ties, freezer paper to keep your work area nice and neat. I have 6 ties. They are about 8 inches each. You can use ribbon or shoelaces or other materials. I also have a box cutter that I use to cut down the board, and also an X-Acto knife, which I use to cut down the papers, pencil. I also have a foam brush that I'll use for gluing. There are also special glue brushes out there, a bone folder, Mod Podge or Elmer's. I prefer PVA glue. We have the Jade PVA glue in our classroom. I just don't know where mine is, so I will use Mod Podge for now. Although I'm not sure if it's acid free or not, so I'm a little hesitant to use it, but I'll just use it for this. And also you'll need some material for your spine. So I grabbed some spare book cloth, but I've also used duct tape or this other material. It's like a tape called Filmoplast. And sometimes you can find ones that are a couple inches tall, like at Paper Source, like in black and white, and sometimes people use those for their spines. Okay, so if you would like to include ties, this is optional, but you'll actually want to start by creating holes for the ties to go through. Now, I've gone ahead and found the center of each of the 3 sides I'd like to use for my ties. This other side here will be reserved for the spine. So about midway through on this, it's about 10.5 inches. I'd like to go about the center and about 1/4 inch in. I might put it a little bit further in just in case. Now you can use a power drill, which we can grab in the sculpture department if you need it. Or you can also do it by hand, which takes a lot longer, and you'll want a really good quality awl, which is almost like an etching needle, but it has a very sharp point, and you basically go here and twist it until you get your hole. Now this I probably would recommend if you ever want to use an awl or a drill. You'll either want to have scrap board right underneath of it, or work over an edge of a table, as close to the edge of the table as possible, so that you have space for the tip of that needle or the tip of that drill to go through without damaging your table. But sometimes even just using a spare board is good. I've also seen people get cleaner drill holes by placing spare board on the very top and the very bottom. What I've done is I've gone ahead and just attached this just to keep, I have both boards here in case I didn't make that clear, and taped together so that they'll stay in place while I'm drilling. Something you'll want to do before you do any gluing of pieces together is you'd like to sand your board that you're using, especially if it doesn't have a very toothy surface. So for example, if you decide to use foam core or sometimes mat board, it's a very smooth surface, and sometimes things need a little bit more of a tooth for it to hold. So what you should do is go through with a piece of sandpaper. I love these kind of like sanding blocks. You can make your own with a piece of sandpaper and like a block, and kind of go over your entire board, back and front. You should use a dust mask because sometimes the particles can make you sneeze, or it's very easy to ingest and it gets very powdery and fine. So please protect yourself and wear a dust mask if you can. And before you move on to the next step, you want to make sure you clean up your entire area and sweep up any little bits of particle board or other kind of dust from your area before you start gluing, so it doesn't, this kind of little stuff doesn't get stuck on your book. Quick tip before we start gluing, I suggest writing down which side of the board is what, labeling your boards, because sometimes at this point it's difficult to remember what is what. So remember, when you make your portfolio, you want your portfolio to be able to close with the ties in about the same location. So I've labeled my left side cover, which will be attached to the book cloth, and I've labeled left inside, and right cover behind here.